There is a moment almost every woman recognizes, even if she has never said it out loud. It is the moment you realize someone in your life has stopped being safe. It doesn't arrive with slammed doors or shouted accusations. It doesn't announce itself. It is quieter than that. So quiet you almost miss it. It is the small sinking feeling that shows up after a phone call ends, when you find yourself replaying a sentence they said, turning it over, asking yourself, did they really mean that the way it sounded? It is the tightness that gathers in your chest right after you've shared something tender, something that cost you a little courage to say out loud, and their response leaves you feeling smaller instead of held. We don't talk about this moment enough. We're taught to talk about heartbreak, about friendship breakups that come with a dramatic falling out, about the loud betrayals, but this quiet erosion rarely gets named. And yet women who have lived long enough, loved hard enough, and lost enough sleep over relationships that quietly drained them know this moment intimately. They've learned something the rest of us are still learning: what to do the moment you feel it. Not with anger, not with a confrontation staged for an audience, not with gossip passed along to make yourself feel justified. With clarity, with quiet, with distance. Because the sturdiest boundaries a woman ever builds are rarely the loud ones. They're the quiet ones, the ones nobody sees her construct, the ones that simply show up one day as an absence, a gap where access used to be. And this isn't just an emotional nicety, it's biology. Researchers who study social connection and physical health have found something sobering. The quality of the relationships surrounding us doesn't just shape our mood, it shapes our lifespan. Poor quality relationships, the kind that leave us anxious, small, or constantly on guard, have been linked to a risk of early death comparable to smoking as many as 15 cigarettes a day. Sit with that for a second. 15 cigarettes every single day. That's what chronic proximity to the wrong person can cost a body over time. And still we hold on. We make excuses. We tell ourselves maybe it isn't that bad. Maybe I'm too sensitive. Maybe if I just try a little harder, explain myself a little better, this will feel different. But wise women, the ones who've made peace with their own intuition, they don't argue with that quiet discomfort in their gut. They listen to it, and when it keeps returning to the same 5 kinds of people, they act, not loudly, not with a scene. They simply and permanently create distance. Tonight, we're going to walk through those 5. Slowly, thoroughly, because recognizing them is the first act of self-protection. And once you see the pattern, you will never be able to unsee it again. Before we begin, it's worth saying clearly what this isn't. This isn't a call to isolate yourself, to grow suspicious of everyone who gets close to you, to treat every friendship as a threat waiting to reveal itself. Wise women are not cynics. If anything, they tend to be some of the most generous, warm, deeply loyal people you will ever meet, which is exactly why they've had to become so discerning about where that warmth and loyalty actually go. A garden doesn't stop being a garden because the gardener pulls weeds. It becomes more of one. The pulling is what makes room for everything else to actually grow. You may recognize yourself uncomfortably in one of these 5 roles as we go. That's not unusual. And it doesn't make you a bad person. Almost everyone has been the chronic taker during a hard season, the drama magnet during a period of real crisis, the subtle competitor in a moment of insecurity they weren't proud of. The difference between a person going through a rough patch and a person who has become one of these 5 permanently is pattern versus moment. We're not here to diagnose anyone as irredeemable. We're here to help you recognize what's a season and what's a pattern that's costing you more than it's giving back, starting with the relationships in your own life, and yes, sometimes starting with the mirror. Keep one hand on your own chest as we go through this. Not literally, necessarily, though you can, if it helps you stay present. What I mean is, keep checking in with your body as each of these 5 comes up. Notice where a name surfaces in your mind before I've even finished describing the pattern. That's useful information. Write it down if you need to. This isn't meant to be theoretical. It's meant to be a mirror you can actually use. 1. The underminer. You probably know this person already, even if you haven't put a name to what they do. Maybe it's a friend from years back. Maybe it's a sibling. Maybe uncomfortably, it's someone you sit next to at work every day. On the surface, there's nothing to point to. They smile. They nod along. They say mostly the right things, and yet you leave every interaction with them feeling just slightly deflated, like something was quietly let out of you, and you can't explain what or how. You tell them about a promotion, and they tilt their head and say, "Wow, that's amazing. I don't know how you handle that kind of pressure. Honestly, I could never." You mention you've started therapy, and there's a pause just a bit too long before they say, "Good for you. I mean, I've personally never needed anything like that, but I hear it helps some people." It's never a direct insult, it's an edge, wrapped in something that sounds like humility or concern. And it chips away at you piece by piece, so gradually you don't notice the erosion until you're already standing in the crater. Psychologists have a term for this, passive undermining, but long before anyone gave it a clinical name, women already knew it by feeling. That specific gut drop after a conversation that should have felt supportive but didn't. You walk away thinking, was that encouragement or was that something else entirely? And 9 times out of 10, you talk yourself out of the second option. You tell yourself you're overreacting. You are not. Researchers who study stress within close relationships have found something striking. Subtle, low-grade negativity from people we're close to can actually do more lasting damage than outright hostility. That seems backwards at first. Shouldn't a direct insult hurt more than a backhanded compliment? But our nervous systems are wired to detect threat wherever it hides, and a threat dressed up as kindness is harder to defend against, precisely because you can't call it out without sounding paranoid. So instead, your body absorbs it. Every one of those compliments with thorns triggers a small spike of cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone, even while you're smiling and saying thank you. And here's the part that should really stop you in your tracks. Research on feedback and performance shows that people who are regularly exposed to this kind of low-grade undermining actually perform worse over time. Not because their skills declined, not because they became less capable, but because they slowly began to doubt their own competence. That is the real cost of the underminer. It's not a single wound, it's a slow shrinking. You stop raising your hand. You stop sharing the big idea. You start hedging your own accomplishments before anyone else can. What makes this person so difficult to walk away from is that they usually believe they're being supportive. They're not stockpiling insults to throw at you. In their own mind, they're being honest or humble or even protective. They hand you a bouquet and it just happens to be full of thorns, and they genuinely don't feel them pricking your hands as you take it. This shows up in a very particular way for women stepping into new territory, starting a business, entering leadership, breaking a pattern their family has repeated for generations. Researchers who study workplace bias have documented this precisely. Women are more likely to receive criticism wrapped in compliments, feedback that sounds encouraging on its surface but leaves the recipient quietly unsettled underneath. It's rarely accidental. It's often the socially acceptable way discomfort with a woman's ambition or competence slips out in polite company, because outright criticism would be considered rude, but concern always finds a way through the door. So what do wise women do with this person? They stop trying to solve the riddle of every comment. You don't need to replay every sentence like you're combing a crime scene for evidence. You just need to ask yourself one honest question after you leave their company. Do I feel lighter or do I feel smaller? Does their version of support actually lift me, or does it come preloaded with doubt? Once you start paying attention with that single lens, the pattern reveals itself embarrassingly fast. The response, when it comes, doesn't need to be a scene. You don't owe anyone a farewell speech, an explanation, or a formal goodbye. Wise women simply step back, quietly. They stop bringing their new ideas to that colleague's desk. They stop calling that friend first when something good happens. They begin protecting their joy and their growth by choosing rooms where those things are actually welcome. Because when a dream is brand new, it is fragile. Your confidence, especially around something you're just beginning, is still finding its roots. You cannot afford to let a subtle current of doubt be the very first thing that touches it. Stepping back from an underminer does not mean you stopped caring about them as a person. It means you started caring, finally, about protecting what you're building. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do for both of you is to leave without a scene, without cruelty, without an argument you'll never actually win. Just quiet, unmistakable distance. Because a wise woman understands something most people take years to learn: silence is not the same as weakness. Silence, chosen deliberately, is one of the strongest forms of self-respect there is. Think about the last time you left a conversation with someone and immediately felt the urge to call a different friend just to feel normal again. That instinct, the need to reset after being around a specific person, is data. It's your own internal system telling you something your conscious mind hasn't fully processed yet. Wise women have learned to treat that instinct as information rather than paranoia. They don't wait for a smoking gun, an undeniable insult they can point to and say, "See, this is why." They act on the pattern of small deflations long before it ever reaches that point, because waiting for undeniable proof usually means waiting until the damage is already done. There's also a quieter cost to staying too long with an underminer. It teaches you to preemptively shrink even in rooms where that person isn't present. You start softening your voice before you even walk in, bracing for a reaction that isn't coming from anyone in front of you. That's the real reason distance matters so much here. It isn't just about avoiding one person's comments, it's about interrupting a habit your nervous system has started forming, the habit of expecting to be diminished. The moment you remove the source, you give yourself the chance to unlearn that flinch entirely. Let that first one settle for a moment before we move to the next. Think of one specific conversation from the last month, just one, where you left feeling that unexplainable deflation. You don't have to do anything with that memory right now. Just let it sit there while we keep going, because the next pattern often travels alongside the first. 2. The chronic taker. This one rarely reveals itself right away. It starts small, innocent even. They need a favor. Of course you help. That's who you've always been, the reliable one, the person others can lean on without a second thought. It happens again, and then again. And somewhere in that repetition, without a single conversation ever marking the shift, you become the one they call whenever life gets hard, when plans collapse, when no one else is answering their phone, when they need advice or a listening ear, or simply someone to absorb the weight of their bad day. You give it every time because you care. And also, if you're honest, because somewhere along the way it quietly stopped feeling like a choice and started feeling like a job description you never applied for. Then one day, you need something back. Nothing dramatic. Maybe you've had a hard week. Maybe you just need someone, anyone, to check in on you the way you've checked in on them 100 times. You reach out, and the silence that follows is louder than you expected. Or worse, they do respond, but half-heartedly. They're on the phone, but their attention is somewhere else entirely. You hang up feeling not comforted, but more alone than you were before you called. That's the moment it becomes undeniable. This relationship was never mutual. It was a transaction, and you were always the one paying. There's a term for the invisible work being described here, emotional labor, coined by a sociologist studying how certain people, disproportionately women, are expected to manage not just their own feelings but everyone else's. We become the default listener, the one who remembers the birthdays, smooths over the family conflict nobody else wants to touch, keeps the group chat from imploding. And when that role stops being appreciated and starts being simply expected, it curdles into something psychologists describe as compassion fatigue, a specific bone-deep exhaustion that isn't about how many hours you worked, but about how much of yourself you handed over without replenishment. It's a particular kind of tired, not the tired that a nap fixes, the kind that settles into your chest and stays there for months, the quiet sensation of having poured from a cup that stopped refilling itself a long time ago. And research into burnout backs this up directly. It's rarely about sheer workload. It's about imbalance. Relationships, like anything else, can either generate energy or slowly siphon it away. Chronic takers are the leak. Not dramatic, not sudden, just constant and easy to underestimate until you're already running on empty. Here's the part that makes them so hard to walk away from. Chronic takers almost never see themselves as takers. In their own story, they're simply leaning on someone strong, someone dependable, someone who always seems to know exactly what to say, and the danger is that you start believing that story too. You tell yourself, they need me, I can handle it, I'm strong enough for both of us. Right up until the moment you're not. Right up until you're the one quietly falling apart, while still, out of habit, showing up for everyone else. Wise women learn to spot this pattern long before it breaks them. They notice the specific weight of carrying a relationship entirely alone, and they stop measuring their own worth by how much they're able to endure. And the shift, again, is quiet. They stop over-explaining themselves. They don't reply to every text the second it lands. They let a call go to voicemail, not out of spite, but out of something closer to self-respect. Because real connection, the kind worth keeping, is reciprocal. Not identical in every exchange, not a scoreboard you're tallying line by line, but balanced over time in a way you can actually feel. Researchers on the psychology of belonging have made a point worth repeating. Here, real belonging never asks you to abandon yourself in order to be accepted. It asks you to stand fully in your own worth and to trust that your needs are just as legitimate as everyone else's. So wise women, in the end, choose relationships where generosity is met with gratitude, not simply expected as a given. They let go, not with resentment weighing down every word, but with the quiet understanding that their time and their energy are finite, and therefore precious, and therefore worth protecting. Because a wise woman knows this in her bones, you cannot build a whole, sustainable life while spending all your strength holding someone else's up. There's a specific kind of grief that comes with recognizing a chronic taker for what they are, and it's worth naming honestly. It isn't the grief of losing someone all at once. It's the slower grief of realizing you were never in the relationship you thought you were in. That the version of closeness you believed you had was in fact one-directional the whole time. That recognition can feel disorienting, even a little embarrassing, as if you should have seen it sooner. You didn't see it sooner because you were busy being the reliable one, and reliable people are rarely given the space to also be the ones who need care. Notice too how differently your body responds to a balanced relationship versus a one-sided one. With a taker, even good news from your own life starts to feel like an inconvenience to bring up. You find yourself hesitating before mentioning something wonderful that happened, almost apologizing for taking up space with your own joy. With someone who reciprocates, that hesitation simply doesn't exist. That contrast, once you notice it, becomes one of the clearest signals available to you. Wise women learn to trust that contrast more than they trust the taker's insistence that everything between you is fine. Take a breath here. This next one tends to hit differently than the first two because it isn't about energy or effort. It's about safety itself and what happens the moment safety quietly disappears from a relationship you thought you could count on. 3. The trust breaker. This one rarely arrives as a single, dramatic betrayal. Usually, it's a hairline crack, easy to explain away the first time it happens. You share something personal, something that took real courage to say out loud, and a week later, you hear a version of it from someone else entirely. Maybe the details have shifted slightly, maybe it's been softened around the edges, but you know, with total certainty, exactly where it started. Or it's even more subtle than that. You open up about a struggle, and later you feel it resurface, not repeated outright, but referenced in a passing comment, folded into a joke that gets a laugh but lands somewhere far too close to the bone for you. You tell yourself it's nothing. You give them the benefit of the doubt. You say, they didn't mean it that way, I'm being too sensitive. But your body disagrees. That ache behind your sternum, the heat that rises in your face, that's not you overreacting. That's your nervous system correctly identifying a breach in something that was supposed to be protected. Relationship researchers who study long-term connection describe trust as something built almost entirely in tiny, easily missed moments. What one well-known researcher calls sliding door moments. Instances where someone has the option to turn toward you or turn quietly away. It rarely comes down to one grand gesture. It accumulates, choice by small choice, into either safety or slow disconnection. Trust gets built when someone remembers the hard day you mentioned once, weeks ago, and checks in anyway. It gets built when someone holds your story as carefully as they'd hold their own. It gets built through consistency, not perfection. But when trust is broken, it's almost never one dramatic collapse. It's erosion. You start holding back just slightly. You share the surface level updates and quietly keep the real pain tucked out of view. You laugh along at the right moments, but there's a tightness in your throat that wasn't there before. Without realizing it, you've started protecting yourself in this person's presence. And that shift, subtle as it is, marks the exact moment the relationship stopped being connection and became something closer to performance. There's fascinating research into oxytocin, the hormone often associated with bonding and trust, showing that it surges when we feel emotionally safe with another person. Our bodies physically relax, our guard lowers, we become capable of real vulnerability. But when trust has been compromised, cortisol takes over instead. We tense, we scan for danger, even while smiling on the surface, even while insisting to ourselves that everything is fine. Wise women feel this shift long before they can fully explain it. They don't need hard evidence or a dramatic confrontation to act on it. They trust the tightening in their own chest, the instinct that says, pull back now. Because here's a truth that's taken most of us far too long to learn. You cannot argue someone into becoming trustworthy. Trust isn't something you demand from another person through a well-worded conversation. It's demonstrated consistently over time, or it isn't real. So wise women stop chasing it. They stop trying to convince someone to finally handle their heart with the care it deserves. They simply let distance speak for them. This isn't about punishing anyone for a single mistake. Everyone gets it wrong sometimes, and perfection was never the standard. Wise women know the difference between an honest misstep and an established pattern. When someone repeatedly makes you feel unsafe holding your own truth in front of them, that isn't clumsiness anymore. That's a choice, whether they'd admit it or not. And choosing to quietly step away from that person isn't cruelty. It's self-protection, plain and simple. Because a wise woman knows that her voice, her story, her history, these things are sacred, and not everyone who asks to hear them has actually earned the right to. What makes a trust breaker especially painful is that the friendship rarely ends because of them. It ends because of you, because you're the one who finally stops offering the parts of yourself that felt exposed the last time. From the outside, nothing looks different. You still talk, you still show up, but internally, you've moved the furniture around. The version of you they get access to now is the curated one, the safe one, the one with nothing left to lose. That's not weakness on your part. That's a boundary doing exactly what boundaries are designed to do. It's worth saying plainly, you are allowed to test someone again after a breach, in smaller ways, and see what they do with it. Trust doesn't have to be all or nothing on the first offense. But if the pattern repeats, if the same story resurfaces in a different disguise, if your vulnerability keeps finding its way into rooms you never invited it into, that repetition is your answer. You don't need a confession. You don't need them to admit what they did. The pattern itself is the confession, whether or not they ever say the words out loud. The fourth type is the one most women feel a little guilty even naming, because it usually involves someone who is, in their own way, genuinely struggling. But struggling and draining are not the same thing, and it's important we make that distinction clearly before we go any further. 4. The drama magnet. You recognize this person almost immediately, even if it takes longer to admit what you're actually seeing. Every conversation is a crisis. Every single day carries some fresh conflict. There's always someone who's wronged them, someone who failed to meet their expectations, someone they're furious with or utterly heartbroken over, and it changes weekly, sometimes daily. At first you lean in. That's what a good friend does, right? You listen, you offer advice, you try to bring a little perspective to the chaos. You tell yourself maybe they just need extra support right now. Life gets hard for everyone sometimes. But then the pattern starts to surface. The names in the story change. The specific details shift slightly each time. But the shape of the story never does. It isn't a bad week. It's every week. And somehow, no matter the circumstance, they're always positioned as the one wronged, always at the center of the storm, stirring it further even in the rare moments it could have quieted down on its own. You tell yourself you're simply being compassionate, but if you're honest with yourself, you're exhausted. You get off the phone with your heart racing like it's your emergency, not theirs. You find yourself checking your messages at night, already bracing for whatever the next wave is going to be. That is not connection. That's something closer to emotional hijacking. Researchers studying emotional agility describe how unmanaged emotional reactivity, being perpetually swept between highs and lows, creates measurable stress not only for the person experiencing it firsthand, but for everyone orbiting around them. Our brains are, in fact, wired for something called emotional contagion. Neuroscientists have documented that we mirror the emotional states of the people we spend the most time with, often without any conscious awareness that it's happening. So if someone around you is in a near constant state of turmoil, your own nervous system absorbs it, almost exactly like secondhand smoke settles into a room whether or not you're the one holding the cigarette. And it isn't only mental. Chronic exposure to high-stress relationships has been shown to trigger repeated cortisol surges, which over time wear down the immune system, disrupt sleep, and can even elevate the long-term risk of heart disease. This is not an exaggeration for effect. Your body genuinely keeps the score of who you let close to you. Here's the hardest part to admit though. Sometimes we stay in these dynamics because some quiet part of us likes being needed, being the stable one. The voice of reason in someone else's storm can feel for a while like purpose, like proof that you matter. It can feel meaningful right up until the moment it doesn't. Right up until you realize that chaos has started to drown out your own peace entirely. Wise women catch this shift before it fully breaks them. They learn to stop mistaking someone else's ongoing crisis for their personal calling. Stepping back becomes clear, almost obvious. Once they understand something essential, you can care deeply about a person without agreeing to carry the full weight of their emotional world. You can offer real empathy without climbing all the way into their storm and getting soaked yourself. The shift again is subtle rather than dramatic. You stop asking for every single update. You stop rushing in to fix things the moment they text. You let a message sit for a while before you respond. And you notice slowly how that changes the shape of the relationship. Some people adjust naturally to that new pace. Others escalate. They may accuse you of changing, of pulling away, of not being the person you used to be. And that reaction, more than anything else, confirms what your role in their life actually was. Not mutual support, but a steady hand keeping their emotional world spinning on its axis. But wise women don't scramble to defend themselves against that accusation. They understand, clearly and without guilt, that protecting their own peace was never selfish. It was essential. Because a wise woman knows this, you can love someone fully and still choose yourself. It helps to notice what actually happens in your body during and after time spent with a drama magnet. Your shoulders climb toward your ears, your jaw tightens without you deciding it should. You find yourself agreeing with things faster than you normally would, just to keep the conversation from escalating further. None of that is imagined. That's your nervous system doing exactly what it's designed to do around perceived instability. Bracing, appeasing, trying to keep the peace even at your own expense. Recognizing those physical signals for what they are gives you a much faster way to identify this pattern than waiting to consciously catalog every dramatic story. It's also worth separating this person from someone genuinely going through a hard season. Everyone has stretches of real crisis, job loss, grief, illness, a marriage falling apart, and showing up for a friend during an actual hard season is not the same dynamic being described here. The drama magnet is defined not by hardship but by frequency and self-positioning. The crisis never actually resolves because on some level, resolution was never really the goal. The goal was the attention, the urgency, the feeling of being the center of someone else's concern. Once you can tell the difference between a friend in a genuine storm and a friend who manufactures one, you'll know exactly which kind of distance is called for and which kind of presence is actually still owed. And now, the fifth, the one that hides best of all, because it wears the exact costume of celebration while doing almost the opposite underneath. 5. The subtle competitor. This one rarely looks like competition on the surface. Sometimes it looks almost exactly like friendship, even admiration. They cheer for you loudly, publicly, where everyone can see it. But underneath, there's something else moving. You feel it in the way they compare your news to their own the second you share it. You hear it in the, "wow, must be nice," tucked casually into a sentence right after you mention an opportunity. You see it in the subtle tension that creeps in whenever your life starts genuinely going well. It's subtle, but it's undeniably there. When you succeed, their smile tightens by a fraction most people would never notice. When you struggle, they lean in with a comfort that feels just a little too eager, and it leaves you wondering, am I imagining this? Because they're never outright cruel. They don't tear you down directly. They celebrate you, technically, but something about the way they do it leaves you feeling watched rather than supported. A psychologist named Leon Festinger developed what's known as social comparison theory decades ago, and it explains this dynamic almost perfectly. We are wired, all of us, to measure ourselves against the people around us. That's simply how we gauge our own progress, how we calibrate what success even means. But when comparison takes root inside a personal relationship, instead of staying a private internal process, it warps the entire dynamic. Suddenly your win doesn't just exist on its own in their mind, it starts to register as their loss. Research into self-compassion has found something equally telling. People who haven't built a stable foundation of self-worth often struggle, genuinely struggle, to celebrate someone else's success without it triggering their own insecurity. Your achievement doesn't inspire them the way it would inspire someone secure in themselves. Instead, it feels like evidence of their own inadequacy. And what makes this particular person so difficult to identify is that they usually don't even realize they're doing it. Their insecurity gets dressed up as curiosity. Their envy wears the costume of concern. So you keep sharing because you want to believe the best about people, because you want this friendship to be exactly what it looks like on the surface. You let them into your dreams, your plans, the private moments where you actually feel proud of yourself. But slowly you notice yourself pulling back. You catch yourself downplaying your own achievements before they even have the chance to react. You shrink your good news down to something smaller and safer, just to avoid that flicker of resentment they try, and fail to fully hide. And that's the moment you understand this relationship was never a safe place for your growth to actually live. Research on goal pursuit and social support backs this up clearly. People surrounded by encouraging, genuinely non-competitive friendships are significantly more likely to both achieve their goals and sustain that success over time. Meanwhile, people surrounded by subtle competition tend to experience higher stress and lower confidence, not because they're any less capable, but because so much of their energy gets diverted into managing the emotional undercurrent running beneath every shared conversation. Wise women feel this shift early, often before they can fully articulate what's changed. They understand at a foundational level that real friendship is spacious. There's room in it for everyone to thrive simultaneously without anyone's light needing to dim so someone else's can shine brighter. There is no scarcity built into genuine love. So they make a quiet, deliberate choice. They stop offering front row seats to people who can't manage to clap without also calculating what your win costs them. They begin guarding their wins the same careful way they guard their healing. Not with secrecy exactly, but with real discernment about who has earned the privilege of witnessing their joy. The distance they create isn't punishment, it's protection. Plain and simple, because a wise woman knows her own growth is non-negotiable, and the people she allows close will either water that growth or quietly withhold the sun it needs to survive. One of the more disorienting things about a subtle competitor is that they're often the loudest person in the room when you succeed publicly. The exaggerated congratulations, the enthusiastic comment left where everyone can see it. It's the private, unwitnessed moments that tell the real story. The flatness in their voice when it's just the two of you, the way the topic changes a little too quickly once the congratulations have been said. Learning to weigh the private reaction more heavily than the public performance is one of the more useful skills a woman can develop. Because public praise costs a competitor nothing. It's a performance for an audience, not a reflection of what they actually feel toward you. There's also a particular trap worth naming: shrinking yourself to keep a competitive friendship comfortable. You start scheduling your announcements around their mood. You wait for their bad week to pass before mentioning your good news. You learn without ever deciding to exactly how to make your life sound smaller than it is, so it won't disturb the balance of the friendship. That habit, once it takes root, doesn't stay contained to just that one relationship. It starts leaking into how you talk about yourself everywhere. Which is exactly why wise women eventually decide the cost of managing someone else's insecurity isn't worth what it takes from their own voice. Take a moment now to notice if any of these 5 overlapped for you, because they often do. The underminer and the subtle competitor, for instance, frequently live in the same person, wearing 2 different masks depending on the day. The chronic taker and the drama magnet often blur together too, since both center every conversation around their own needs, just through different doors. You don't need to sort anyone into a single, tidy category. Life rarely works that cleanly. What matters is the underlying signal, not the exact label. The recurring sense after time with a specific person that you are smaller, more depleted, less trusting of your own perception than you were before the conversation started. It's worth also saying this clearly: none of these 5 patterns require you to hate the person attached to them. You can recognize that someone is an underminer and still remember, honestly, that they've also shown up for you in real ways over the years. You can see the chronic taker clearly and still feel genuine tenderness toward them. Character. It's a decision about proximity, made specifically to protect your own capacity. Nothing more dramatic than that, and nothing less important either. Closing. Letting people go silently and with grace is never easy. It runs against nearly everything we were taught growing up, about loyalty, about forgiveness, about what it means to be considered a good, patient, generous person. But wise women eventually understand something that took most of them years of hard-won experience to learn. Protecting your own peace is not cruelty. It's clarity. It's the ability to finally distinguish between real compassion and quiet self-sacrifice. It's recognizing once and for all that your time, your energy, and your heart are sacred resources, and not everyone who wants access to them has actually earned it. Letting go doesn't mean wishing anyone harm. It means simply and honestly wishing yourself well. It means choosing deliberately to build a life filled with mutual respect, real and demonstrated trust, and people who genuinely want to see you win, not because your success benefits them in some hidden way, but because they love you enough to want good things for you regardless of what it costs them. So the next time you feel that quiet knowing settle in your gut, that specific signal that someone in your life is taking more than they're giving, listen to it, trust it. Your boundaries were never meant to be walls built to keep love out. They are doors carefully placed that decide who gets to come further in. You deserve relationships that leave you feeling stronger, not smaller. You deserve people who celebrate you fully, not merely tolerate your presence in their lives. And more than anything else, you deserve to feel at peace inside your own life, exactly as it is right now. If you recognize someone from your own life somewhere in these 5, and chances are you did, maybe more than once, resist the urge to act on that recognition tonight in a burst of adrenaline. Wise women don't make these decisions from a place of hurt or reaction. They let the recognition settle first. They sit with it for a few days, watch the pattern confirm itself one more time or reveal itself as something smaller than they first feared, and only then do they begin quietly to create the distance that pattern actually calls for. There is no prize for moving fast here. The goal was never speed, it was clarity. And if somewhere in this list you caught a glimpse of yourself instead of someone else, if a part of you recognized the underminer or the taker or the drama that seems to follow you from room to room, take that seriously too, and take it gently. Awareness is always the first step back toward becoming the kind of presence in someone else's life that you're hoping to find in your own. Nobody arrives fully formed as a wise woman. It is built relationship by relationship, boundary by quiet boundary, over years. Carry this with you the next time your gut goes quiet and still around someone, or loud and unsettled around someone else. Your body has been trying to tell you the truth this entire time. It was never overreacting. It was paying closer attention than your mind was willing to admit. Protect your peace the way you'd protect anything else you built with your own 2 hands, and don't intend to lose. Choose the people who choose you back, fully, consistently, without conditions attached. And when it's time to let someone go, let it be quiet. Let it be without malice. Let it simply be certain. Thank you for staying until the end and for having the quiet courage it takes to choose yourself.